You know, for a show about martial arts primarily, Dragon Ball sure does love a dose of mad science! Hey folks, MasakoX here. Now, like we said just now, you would be surprised that a show that is geared towards the pursuit of martial arts, and Eastern mythology of course has powers as well, that could rival deities so entrenched in their power for eons, it does like to have its fair share of scientific content thrown in for good measure. And after all, the second character that we see, aside from Goku, Bulma, is an engineer and scientist by trade and hobby. Her family is absolutely ensconced with scientific discoveries and innovations, and that is only the beginning. From there, we saw tons of examples of inventors, scientists, professors, and doctors throw their towels into the ring and create the greatest things in the world to combat the Dragon Team, and in some cases, they even threw themselves into the fray. It's not all about evil villains or magical genies, so let's take a look at Dragon Ball's mad, good, or simply straight up evil geniuses, and decide which one of them is the smartest or most successful, as well as taking into account, of course, their shortfall. I mean, nobody's perfect, we have to look at their failures too. Now, we won't be taking Bulma or Dr Briefs into consideration here, despite us acknowledging their technological prowess and narrative significance. On paper, yeah, they're really good. Why this is the case exactly is that they would easily and quite predictably top the list because they're still around. It's too obvious. They are successful, so let's push them to the side for the moment, like they don't exist. Instead, we are going to look at the evil scientists from different parts of the franchise, including games, spin-offs, movies, and such. So, one of the first notable scientists that seem more suited to this mad category, some way, is Dr. Flappe, or Dr. Frapp. It's sort of like Mega Man's Dr. Light or Right all over again, isn't it? And yes, we might argue that he is a filler character technically, and also not as unhinged as some others on our list, but you've got to remember here, in the anime, he was dubbed the mastermind behind the initial batch of androids for the Red Ribbon Army. He was the one that got the ball rolling within the confines of the series, before Giroud was created for the manga. And okay, we all tend to associate Giroud with the androids entirely, and quite rightly in a way. He did supercharge them and take the project on board, making them into what we're more accustomed to today, but Dr. Flappe started it all, we must remember that. Whilst the official version states that both of the scientists were cooperating with one another simultaneously, it is important to note that in at least one canon of Dragon Ball, Flappe is the one who put the bomb inside Android 8, or Eta, and we have never seen him confess to this fact, despite vowing to do so. Put simply, he kept welching on it. He seems like the kind of guy who would. He kind of should do it, but he hasn't got the courage to do so. As he wasn't the main man behind the project going the way it did, and unlike many on this list, he actually was genuinely remorseful about his actions. His rating on this list would be about 2 secret sublabs out of 10. Okay, so Flappe was one of the first highlighted scientists in the series, but he wasn't the first. You see, we often forget about this character in terms of his scientific prowess, but he does have his fair share of experience going for him with developing things like his own, albeit not exactly portable, Dragon Radar, powerful robot suits, and he's even a pretty impressive programmer and mathematician. That's right, we're now talking about Pilaf. You know, the garlic junior that actually has some sort of relevance. Yeah, those machines of revenge didn't design themselves, and the sole fact is that he was one of the few characters, we don't count the Red Ribbon Army's one as that one was pretty faulty a lot of the time, to build a functional Dragon Ball radar, which makes him already quite a spectacular inventor. The only thing that would hold him back most likely is his access to resources, and they are most likely small fry in comparison to Capsule Corp. I mean, come on, they're the most lucrative company in the world, and you have a little despot empire. Yeah, there's only so much you can do, despite your brains. Originally more of a comedic villain, and then later on becoming a sidekick to King Piccolo, Pilaf becomes a valuable ally and intern to the Capsule Corp, although it's initially out of convenience because they have no money, they have no place to go, they kinda need the work. Due to him being an absolute classic character though, with a lot of charm, we cannot help but give him at least 4 secret sublabs out of 10. Right, okay. Next one on the list is going to be a relative newcomer to the list. Or is he really a newcomer? It really depends on your interpretation here. When we think about iconic designs from Dragon Ball Z, we usually tend to think of Scouters, the Saiyan battle armor, and of course, the quintessential Freezer ships. Apparently, Kikono is the one who might have been the mastermind behind all of that. And of course, he might have used some Tuffle designs as a base, because obviously you would want to pilfer things to help advance your own kind, and the help of someone called Gichamu, if Gichamu isn't simply Kikono's old name before he became Kikono, but still, most of the Freezer tech comes from this guy. And while his inventions are quite formidable, he himself isn't quite. He's more of a goofy character, being very timid and scared of his master. He is sort of like the Igor to Dr. Frankenstein. Regardless of all of that though, his influence has been felt throughout the entirety of Z, so we give him 5 secret sublabs. Now, we just mentioned Tuffles here, and there is no talking about Tuffles of course without mentioning one of the most brilliant minds from said species, and the owner of the most hilarious jaw drop in the entire series, Dr. Lychee or Rychee. Light, right, flap, frap, and yes, seriously, this face just gets Haverock all the time. This Saiyan-hating genius is best known for the creation of the Ghost Warriors, including his own copy, and harnessing the power of hatred itself. Pure, concentrated naughtiness! Among the copies on display, as you might recall, from depending the original 1993 OVA or to the 2010 one, are the likes of Frieza, Cooler, Lord Slug, and Turles, giving us the villain all-stars battle from the first half of Dragon Ball Z that we always wanted to have. Not only that, but he is responsible for building a massive computer, Hachik, that actually materializes itself into a pretty terrifying fighter, all sparkly and glowing in the dark, that gets constantly remade into OVAs and video games alike. I mean, it's got to count for something if your character gets rebooted into a fairly mediocre OVA for a video game. You know you've made it. For the persistence of his creations and his never-ending revenge of the Saiyan race, we grant Dr. Lychee 6 sublabs, as in his case, they seem completely justified. It's not like your typical scientist stories where they are quite mad or irrational. No, Lychee genuinely has some sort of reason to feel bad about Saiyans and to avenge his fallen comrades. Fair enough. We carry on our foray into scientists, remaining in the area of Tuffle-related scientists, but this time we go to the infamous GT era of the franchise. Yes, he looks like Dr. Gero in a Halloween costume, and sure, his plans were quite similar to Lychee's, very similar to Lychee's, but boy was this one more successful. Yes, it's Dr. Mew. While you may argue that he was merely just a puppet of a Tuffle parasite, which we later found out was Baby, we do have to admit that without his help, the sinister villain would not be quite as successful. His intellect had to count for something in the grand scheme of things. But then on top of that, in the most infamous part of Dragon Ball GT, he was the one to trick Dr. Gero and organize the whole Hithelscape plan. In the end though, he does end up being destroyed by his own creation, which does mark him down a fair bit because, you know, you kind of failed if you don't live anymore. So, we feel that maybe 7 sublabs is a fine compromise. Now, it wouldn't be a Dragon Ball Mad Scientist discussion list without the first lady of the Dragon Ball Mad Science bit herself, Android 21, our most recent addition to the roster. Now, okay, while we may have some problems with her margin form, I mean it just seems to be just tacked on for no adequate reason, and of course some more of her, let's say problematic aspects of her personality, doesn't seem to work with Dragon Ball most of the time, we do have to admit though, for the longest time, she was able to play off of nearly every other villain and convince them to help her or at least get under their skin, which is no mean feat. Not only that, but managing to put most of the fighters on equal footing is a feat in itself too. Unlike many of the previous insane and maniacal masterminds on this list, 21 is a powerful fighter herself. You may even say that she is a little bit too power hungry. Emphasis on the word hungry. On top of all of that, her power suppression weight machine might be one of the most impressive inventions in the show, even though it's mostly just used as a narrative device, temporarily used, meant to explain why Yamcha is able to duke it out with the likes of Perfect Cell on equal terms for a genuinely long time. I mean, either way, It's still a very neat and plausible way to make everyone equal for a little bit. So 7.5 sublabs for this lady, please. Now, if we're going to be talking about big brain time thinkers, we have to mention the biggest brain of the bunch, literally, Dr. Weilow. He comes packed with Dr. Cochin too, so we treat them as one entry. Back when Dragon Ball wasn't oversaturated with transformations, we had the big brain himself. He is an evolved, disembodied human brain that seeks for the body of the ultimate fighter in which to set out and bring Earth into a new era of science and domination. His fortress is quite impressive, as is his mechanical body that can take on 4 combined Kamehamehas at the same time, and that for early Z was very cool to see. And remember kids, this was very impressive back in the day, it was a big deal. And whilst he was evil and arrogant in his persona, he is not blind to the power of others. He is very aware of what the capabilities were of the Dragon team because he did his research, and he did respect the skills of his opponents. That's why he wanted them. He wasn't kidding himself. All he wanted to do was just take them. How he planned though to fit his brain inside Goku's body is a mystery, though there might be actually a lot of vacant space there. 8 sublabs for Weilow. Before we get to the top 2, here is a mysterious honorable mention. Dr. W. We have no idea who this guy is, or his placement on this list. Totally not. He kind of looks like more of an evil version of Colonel Sanders. He has a weird cybernetic light with a single red LED. He's also allied with fuel. He can gather data, and has an arm blade, and we're never going to find out who he really is. Yeah. By the way, guys, it's Dr. Weilow. That's the joke. It's still Weilow, guys. Number 2 is, obviously, the Doctor, Dr. Gero. If you have been watching our channel for any meaningful amount of time, you know that Dr. Gero is one of our favourite Dragon Ball villains, and he's a very popular figure with some of the viewers of our What If Roundtable too. Looking at you, Craig, all of your scenarios, they're certainly memorable. Who he just started out as a simple human. Gero, not Craig, by the way. Quite frankly, the reason why we hold him in such high regard is that he is very symbolic. He is the last human villain in the series, ever. And granted, now he's more robot than man, but he was born human, which in turn is the last connection to the original Dragon Ball series. Despite us not seeing him in the first iteration of the show, him being created later, his presence was part of the army still, albeit in the shadows. Nice little callback. His genius level of intellect has allowed him to develop such mechanical marvels as the Infinity Engine, his own supercomputer, and the androids. Of course evolved from Flappe's versions, as well as the biomechanical cell, achieving something very big actually, perfecting mechanical and biological symbiosis. Also, he was quite adept at creating energy-draining machinery that allowed him to hold his own against Z-fighters, at least for a little bit. And also, he was able to drain powers and have things in his hand before it was cool. Right, Moro? While he was off relatively fast in comparison to others, his legacy is lingering over the series to this day, as the Cell Saga was not only a very defining time for the franchise itself, it also introduced 17 and 18, who are still in the show, and they're not going away anytime soon, and thusly, a chance for Giroud to at least be mentioned in passing, or be relevant in some way. And, as we like to joke, 17's involvement in the Tournament of Power basically saved the multiverse, making Giroud a very indirect saviour of it. And in a way, he sort of wanted Earth to become better, but this wasn't the way he would have done if he originally planned it. So we give him 9 sublabs for that. So okay, who do we rate above the almighty Doctor? I mean, after all, it's a biggie. Giroud is the definitive mad scientist of the Dragon Ball franchise, and every obvious candidate has already popped up. Well, you've got to take something into consideration here, that the brightest insane mind of the franchise might not necessarily come from Universe 7. That's right. Our number 1 mad scientist is Dr. Paparoni of Universe 3. But Massaco! Why is that guy rated higher than the likes of Giroud, 21 Weilow, and many others? You're liking Super too much, Massaco! Unsubscribe! Man, that's been a while since I could genuinely include that in a video, hasn't it? First of all, Dr. Paparoni controls all the mechanical beings of Universe 3, and I mean all of them. And if you watch the anime version of the tournament arc very closely, you can see how potentially dangerous those guys can be, and some of those powers, if used in isolation, are very vicious. I mean, Narirama, I wouldn't want to go anywhere near him. Not only that, but he himself is strong enough to stay in the ring for quite a long time, being able to go toe-to-toe with the likes of Zerloin and Rabandra of Universe 2, one of the strongest universes in play. He wasn't just watching from afar or from the sidelines with the God and the Angel, no, he was getting stuck in. Also, for some reason, he switches from having round ears to elven ears. We're not quite sure why. Animation error, fashion choice, I don't know what Universe 3 gets up to. But to be entirely serious, this guy was entrusted by his God to save Universe 3, and we'd be unfair to say that his attempt was not impressive. He himself became part of Agnilaza, or Amiraza, a powerful mechanical amalgamate. And to defeat Agnilaza, we needed to see Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, 17 and Frieza working together in order to beat him. And true, we had seen more powerful enemies individually by now, but so far this is a creation that needed direct involvement from half of the Universe 7 team, and even then, it didn't seem like an easy victory. They had to fight for it. Paparoni was willing to put his life on the line for his universe and participate in that risky fusion. So for that sense of bravery, we are going to be giving him 10 sublabs out of 10. But do you agree with our list? Did we forget about anyone? Who do you think Dr. W is? I mean, seriously guys, come on, it's Weilow. Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!